Welcome back to episode 8 of the Spartan Hoops podcast. I'm here, David Klein, the host, with my co-host, Greg Waddell. We have no time to waste. Greg is in a bit of a crunch today. He's got a green room engagement that is going to start sharply at 9 o'clock. We're at 8:11 here, so we're going to do our best. We've been going like an hour and 30, so we'll see if we can squeeze this in here. But the main focus of tonight's episode is going to be on the Big Ten. Greg did a really nice article. We put it up yesterday. The biggest question for each Big Ten team. You can check that out in Spartan Hoops. It's actually in front of the paywall right now, so I highly recommend you guys check that out. It was good, and I think it kind of led us into what we wanted to do for this episode. I did this with Dan last year, and then we didn't keep track of it. I assume that Greg is going to be much better about keeping track, especially with the way that he's been winning wagers with Carter. So we're going to flip a coin, and we're going to do a Big Ten draft of teams, and then we're kind of going to explore a little bit of each team, the players, and just kind of the projections for the season for this team. I think it's just kind of a fun way to do it. So I got a coin in my pocket here. Greg, I'm going to let you call it.
Heads.
It is tails. So
Never
the way
fail.
we're going to do the draft is 1, 3, 6. And then because I think that there's a distinct advantage to be able to draft first, if we were to let you go just straight up, the person who goes second will get both 4 and 5. So I am going to choose.
Question before you choose. Is the goal to pick the team with the best record? That's what we're keeping track with?
So collectively, between the teams that you select, the 7 teams that we select, the best overall record.
Conference or whole season?
Just the conference play. I think we just stick with conference play because all the different non-conference stuff, some people have tougher schedules. That'd be way too difficult, I think. So just conference play, the 20-game slate, total games. So it'll be 140 games for the 7 teams that we select a piece.
Love it.
Okay. And before we get to that, I just wanted to touch briefly on a little bit of news. We got news today that Chicago Loyola is going to be the first team that Michigan State sees. I think that makes sense probably from a rating perspective. Getting Drew Valentine, former assistant, against Tom Izzo. They actually bring back a pretty nice team. And I think, as we get a little closer to the season, Greg will dive into that because he's friends with Drew, and we'll get a bit, kind of an insider perspective on that. But that's pretty exciting. And then also Michigan State extended an offer to class of 22. He's listed as a power forward. To me, he's a center in college. That's Braden Huff. He's a teammate of Jaden Shute. I've watched quite a bit of film on him since they've made the offer. I thought maybe it would be pending, and so I kind of try to keep tabs on him. I'm somewhere in between on this. I think, maybe as an upperclassman, he's a decent guy. Some of the offers that he has, Wisconsin, Illinois, I want to say Iowa, he just screams a Wisconsin big to me. We've had this conversation, Greg, via text and the group chat. I just think that maybe he has an ability to be able to be a decent upperclassman. But after the Thomas Kithier years, it's really hard to take a guy who looks like he'd have trouble jumping over a dime in your front court. And I like the fact that he's a lefty. He can step it out and shoot the 3. But there's serious athletic and strength concerns that he has for me right now. I think he's more of a longer-term project. And with what appears to be Terrace Reed heading to Michigan, it seems like the center board is kind of vacant for Michigan State, so I understand it. But for me personally, I think that I would rather maybe just try to go grab a guy in the portal, either a guy that's been for a couple of years, because you're going to have, Matty Sissoko, you're going to have Julius Marble. So really you'd like maybe some consistency at the position, but maybe it's not worth long-term having him. I'm kind of split on that decision all around. What do you think generally about his game, and what's your opinion on him?
I think it was a good offer. I mean, I think it's a good offer for 2 reasons, and you kind of hit on them. One, you got to offer him because Shute's there. And if it works out, great. But, if there's anything that can boost your chances with Shute right now, you have to do it. And 2, he's a top 100 kid with good size, with a good shot. He's not a nobody. And I get, I think there was just some general, not pause, but I don't know what the word would even be. Just maybe a little are we sure this is our type of center? And maybe he's not, but there's enough to work with there. He has really good size. He has really good touch. He's a top 100 player. And right now with the way Michigan State's recruiting that class, Yeah, get offers out to top 100 players, and I won't complain.
I guess I'm with you. He's rated as a top 100, I think, on 24/7, but the composite, he's unranked, so he's kind of somewhere in the middle. He looks like he has extremely good passing instincts, and he looks like he has a decent feel for the game, but I'm basically describing Thomas Kithier to you, except for the fact that he can step it out and shoot it. That's maybe the difference that sets him apart and why you would consider taking him. Like you said, Duke is now putting on the full court press. Jon Scheyer spent a lot of time. I saw this morning that Jaden Schutt's at the MBPA Top 100 camp along with Trout and Holloman. I saw that Scheyer was again watching Schutt. So Duke is starting to press in on him. There's been some chatter that you've heard and kind of passed along that they think that he's kind of a possible Duke lean. And I would just say a kid who values academics, which he absolutely does and his family does, to have that Duke offer and for it to be a real offer, which it apparently seems to be, that's kind of a perfect offer for a white guy shooter who values academics. It's really hard to get much better in terms of value for that. So I just think Michigan State is in an unfortunate situation where Duke has jumped in late, and if he goes there, it's really hard for me to blame him given that the value on that is placed. And I think to a certain degree, maybe he's in a position where he would be over-recruited every year. It remains to see what Jon Scheyer is going to do in the recruitment-wise at Duke when Coach K is gone. But I think at least for a couple of years, he's going to be able to keep some of that momentum. And we've seen guys like McConnell. We've seen guys like Joey Baker who've gotten buried on the bench and have had a hard time coming that. Maybe Schutt is a little bit better class of player. But eventually, he's going to be over-recruited at that spot, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think Schutt would be a much better fit at Michigan State or at a lot of other schools than Duke. However, to give a little pause there, because I've seen a lot of people just be like, look at Alex O'Connell, or look at the other white guys that were fringe top 100 guys that went to Duke. It didn't really work out. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement. I think there's a path to Schutt being a really good 4-year player, whether it's at Duke or somewhere else. And I think the fact that Coach K is leaving probably helps him with that. I don't know how that affects his recruitment, but I don't think Jon Scheyer is necessarily going to come in and pull 3 McDonald's All-Americans in his first 4 years, the way that Coach K has been in the last 5 years. Now, he's certainly capable of that, and the Duke name, program, branding itself stands for itself. But I wouldn't be surprised if Schutt doesn't get as recruited over as he would have with Coach K under the new direction of Jon Scheyer. And in general, I think Schutt has the game to back it up. I don't know. I think even if he is a middling role player his first year, by year 2, year 3, I would not be surprised to see him crack the rotation, even if they do keep pulling really good recruits, which is why it's so imperative that Michigan State stay on him, which is why it's great that they offered Huff. And just to touch on what you said, the rumblings I've been hearing. So I have a couple close contacts that have attended Peach Jam this year for reporter-based things. They're writing articles. They were doing scouting. And 2 separate folks that I texted responded and said, it sounds like it's Duke. I don't think there's anything imminent. I don't think there's a silent commit, but I do think there's talk amongst coaches that they really feel like he's a Duke lean at this point. I do think that could change. That's just my speculation. And I think Tom Izzo and staff are doing everything they can to change that, as they should. Because you and I both know how critical Schutt is to this class that we're after. Yeah,
absolutely. It could change, right? Scheyer could go back towards more of what we saw of Duke when he went through and they won a national championship with more 3 to 4 year type players. It's possible that his recruitment falls back into kind of that category. I'll say this, Joey Baker was a top 40 kid. He played 11 minutes last year as a junior. So at a certain point in time, if the recruitment of Duke and Duke keeps that prestige among kind of top, 20, 30 kids, it's really difficult to be able to get on the floor when you're constantly getting guys who are going to be one and done prospects. They expect to play. They're going to play. And so finding your role is different. I just think he would be a perfect fit for Michigan State. I think he instantly is going to get playing time, particularly with the depth in the wing, which we've talked about numerous times. And he has the ability to grow well there. And I think that, what you've seen with Bryn Forbes, He's going to make you play defense. He's going to give you the ability to possibly get yourself in the league at your size with your ability, which is, elite shooting ability. So interesting to see what happens with that. It's a little concerning because I think if he goes, on the wayside, then the class really falls apart a little bit to a certain degree. You don't really have another wing option per se that you think really comfortably is going to come into the fold, and you're going to be heavy in the portal. I think they don't really have any other choice. But
by the way, I have to self-correct because I've made at least one mistake on every episode. It wasn't Peach Jam. It was the event that Shoot was actually playing at this week that they were at. I forget what it was called.
It was like the UA. He plays for the Under Armour circuit. So Peach Jam is EYBL through Nike, and I think he was at the UA, whatever it was.
Yeah, they won. They won the tournament. Yeah. The Illinois Wolves did. So
yeah, and he put up 20-plus points several times there for sure. So. Yeah. All right, so let's get right into the draft then. We've wasted already 10 minutes of Greg's time here. I'm going to choose 2, 4, 5. So I'll let you pick first.
Wow. Yeah. God, I hated that. I really wanted to. Because you know what I want. I want to end up with Michigan here.
Yeah. So I'm going to make you pick the team that you don't want to, or you're going to – I wouldn't call it a reach because I think to me it's – you can go either way with it, but
so I get 1, 3, 6, right?
1, 3, 6. Yep.
If you had 2 and 3, I would pick Purdue, but because I get 3, I'll do the Greg Waddell homer pick and take the Wolverines one.
Okay. I mean, we've talked at great length about Michigan. I think that for me, there's kind of a clear tier of the top 2 teams, and then I think that there's a little bit of separation at that next level. I think that maybe the third team, I would say, is kind of separated themselves a little bit into maybe a tier of their own, in my opinion. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you just have to like what Michigan has in terms of upside. I think that they have a pretty safe floor, as safe as anybody in that top half of the conference. And the upside is as good as anybody's, if not better, in the conference. So you can't go wrong with that pick. I'm going to choose Purdue. Jaden Ivey gives you the upside. Trevion Williams. I like that this team is old. I like that Painter just consistently has hung around kind of the top 5 in the conference for a while. For all his lack of, tournament success, he really has done a nice job of stabilizing the program, particularly in the conference. They got a piece of the Big Ten championship. Was it a couple years back? I think they tied with Michigan State. I would say maybe was it 18 or 19? I can't remember when they got a piece of it. But anyways, he's consistently produces a product. I just think this is the right mix of talent. The 2 top 50 kids coming on, and Caleb first. I can't think of the other power forward's name. What's his name? Do you remember off the top of your head?
Trey Kaufman.
What?
Trey Kaufman, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Kind of play both kind of power forward position. Maybe first can play a little bit of center, depending. But obviously Edie's there as well. We saw Edie and Ivy both in the World UB FIBA tournament, and I think they showed out pretty well. I just think that there's a nice solid base for that team. They have the most favorable schedule in the Big Ten, as we talked about, and kind of that top part of the conference. So I think Purdue is a pretty safe pick at number 2.
I agree. It's a clear top 2. I really think Purdue's probably 1A at this point. Michigan's 1B. I do think Michigan has a slightly higher ceiling than Purdue, and that's a personal opinion more than anything else. But I just think they're a more talented roster if the freshmen are ready for large minutes. Remains to be seen if they are. Purdue's floor is absurdly high. I mean, the worst case scenario for Purdue is like top 10, top 15. So that's a very good pick. Good value at 2.
Yeah, I think Purdue's floor is maybe a pinch safer, but Michigan's ceiling is higher. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to frame it. And yeah, I think either way, we're both happy with our first pick. I would say that.
Yep. So where are you going number 3?
This is going to surprise you, I think. And I'm doing this partially to twist a knife toward you. But I'm going to take a team that's going to force you to take a team at 4 or 5 that I don't think you want to take. I'm going to take Illinois. And
that's who I assumed that you were going to take.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought I guess going into this, I would have had Ohio State slightly higher than Illinois. I know you're down on Ohio State. And after I did my most recent article with the biggest question for each team, my question for Illinois was basically, what does the Curbelo show look like? And as I wrote it out, I'm like, damn, this is better than I thought it could be. They're going to have an elite pick and roll threat surrounded by shooters with a genius point guard. I love that formula. Then you look at Ohio State, and the biggest question was who steps up in the backcourt. And the candidates are a guy who averaged 2 points a game last year, a guy who averaged 4 points a game last year for Penn State, and an incoming true freshman who looks good, but he's an incoming true freshman who is more a wing than a guard. So I have too many questions for Ohio State. I know you're skeptical of Chris Holtmann, and you've kind of talked me into doing that. I hate Brad Underwood with my entire living being, but Curbelo and Coburn's too good to pass up. So give me Illinois 3.
I agree with that pick. I think that with the return of Coburn, they've clearly placed themselves as kind of number 3 on that. I think he gives them an extremely safe floor. What their ceiling is, to me, is just dependent on kind of doesn't a wing or forward emerge. I know there's been some chatter about Austin Hutchinson. He was injured for part of last season. He transferred up. I think he was the D2 guy, I want to say, but he's supposed to be a shooter, athletic. I just don't really love the wing core. I know that wasn't really a problem last year that they had such a small backcourt, but for me, Curbelo is really the deciding factor on this. You discussed kind of that 3-game stretch when Ayo was out with the injury, and he performed extremely well, but the turnovers were too high. He averaged like over 4 turnovers a game during that stretch. I think that was a really big thing for him, the ball security. And he's going from essentially the 3rd or 4th scorer, more like the 4th scorer on the roster, to being like the number 2 guy and the primary guy. So he's being asked to be doing way much more. I think that he's going to move towards the top of that scouting report, and teams are going to be like trying to figure out how to stop him. The jump shot is a serious question. I need to see him. I mean, I think he shot like 17% from 3 last season. That's got to be like at least in the 30%, or guys are just going to stop respecting that and kind of clogging the lane a little bit on him. And then you kind of look at what's around him. I like what's around him, but it's kind of the same piece over and over again. Like DeMonte Williams, Alonzo Plummer, who's from Utah, and Trent Frazier, like undersized shooting guards who can hit the 3 but don't really create. So who else is going to help with the creation on the roster? I'm not quite sure where it's at. I don't love either the power forward position or the 3 spot. I think that they're essentially going to have to just play 2 guards or 3 guards around Coburn with Curbelo. So I'd like at least the floor for the team, but I'm a little bit curious to see kind of what that ceiling is. And if Curbelo can take down the turnovers and start hitting a couple threes, I think this team could contend for a possible Big Ten title. They certainly at least have some of that like chip a little bit. They were chippy last year, and I think that they just play with a little bit of attitude. So I'm curious to see what kind of their projection is going to be this year, because I think he's done a really nice job with his both the 21 and the 22 class of kind of filling some of the need that they were missing last year in the wing department. So if some of these younger guys can help them and they get a little bit extra out of some of these kids, then maybe they can kind of scoot in there and be in the discussion towards the end of the season for Big Ten contention. Number 4, I get 4 and 5. This is kind of tough. I'm going to just take the high upside here. To me, it doesn't matter 4 or 5. You kind of want to slot it. I kind of have a feel like 4 through 6 or 7 to me is all kind of the same to a certain degree. I think there's more upside. I'm going to take Michigan State. I think that, as we discussed, the floor for this team is probably the scariest out of most of the top half conference teams, just because we really don't know what we're going to get out of multiple positions, particularly the point guard spot and particularly, what you're going to get out of the center spot. I think I personally feel a little bit more comfortable than you do about where it's headed for the center spot. I'm a believer that Bingham has the ability to play 20 minutes a night. I think that he's going to finally put it all together, and I'm hopeful that that is the case. But really, the point guard spot is the biggest question. As we talked about previously, if A.J. Hoggard starts off the season at it, I kind of like the combination of possibly Tyson Walker and Jaden Akins coming off the bench together. I think that that's a pretty sexy combination. I like the depth. There's a little bit of concern maybe at the wing, but everywhere else you think you're pretty full. And if guys just have the season that we thought they were going to last year, and a couple of these freshmen play extremely well, Michigan State has a title to be in Big Ten title contention. It depends on if all the pieces come together, and there's a lot more question marks than probably the other 3 teams that we discussed. What are your thoughts, I guess, on that? I mean, we've discussed Michigan State pretty extensively on the podcast.
Yeah, we've summarized it at this point, I think, at length. I mean, there's just so much to be seen. It's a wait-and-see approach with Michigan State. You're right that it's the highest variance between their best-case scenario and their worst-case scenario in the conference. I had them 5th on my big board for what it's worth. I think they're a clear top 5. I personally have Ohio State ahead of them, and I'm very curious to see if you take the Buckeyes with this 5th spot here.
And that's where I'm going with number 5. I think the way that Holtman plays and coaches, again, the floor for Ohio State is probably arguably a bit safer, maybe just what they have when you have, what would expected to be probably a first-team All-Big Ten guy and E.J. Liddell coming back. I think that you have, a safety net. You have a guy that you can lean on. And he's probably going to put up, what did he score last season? Just under 16?
Yeah, so, I want to say it was around 16.
Yeah, so if Washington's out the door now, you figure that he's probably closer to that 18, 19 point per game. Like, he's going to start getting a lot more touches. The only thing that concerns me, as we've discussed, when Dwayne Washington went out the door, is just where's the shot creation coming from? I'm not a fan, really, of Jamari Wheeler from Penn State. I will have to see with Malachi Branham, that top 30 kid coming in. I just think that there's a lot of questions in the backcourt. I think that defensively they should be pretty decent. I'm a Zed Key guy, actually. I get like Nick Ward vibes a little bit. He gets back into shape. I like that. He's a lefty, right? I think he's a lefty.
He's a lefty, yeah.
Yeah, I just like big body guys. If he can get in shape and run the floor a little bit better, I think he can give them a weapon. They just seem to be kind of in that top 5 mix ever since, and I don't love the way that he's finished, but I think that if you're going to bet against him kind of outside this top 5, it would be a fool's errand. So I will take Michigan State at 4 and Ohio State at 5.
Actually, I'm sorry. I think he might not be left-handed. I really thought he was. Now I'm stuck on that.
He didn't play enough for me to remember that, but maybe you're right. Maybe he's not.
I feel like I'm picturing him just literally being a worse Nick Ward, but I might be
right hand
manifesting that. I don't know. Okay, do I have 6 and 7 now, or do I just have 6?
Nope, 6, 7, then it goes back to it.
Okay. And then is it reverse snake the rest of the way too? So 6, 7, then you have 8, 9?
No. So 6, 7, and then you have 8. Just go right back now. It was just for that 2 picks because I thought 1, 3, if the teams were all kind of even the top 4, but I thought 1, 3 kind of was a little bit heavier weight. And then once you got to 4, it kind of was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like those rules, Commissioner Klein. All right, we'll go, man. Well, since I get the 2 back-to-back, this makes it safe.
No, you don't get any back-to-back. That's what I'm saying. It's just
you're
7 just for that section. That's what I was trying to explain to you.
Oh man, so I'm gonna get stuck with the last pick. This is brutal. Can I bet on you to win this competition then?
No, you can't bet on me.
I think it'd be fair to give me 6, 7. Personally.
If you really think it's going to come down to the last 2 teams, I will give you 13 and I'll pick 14 if that makes you feel better.
Deal. I'll do that because I think Minnesota's going.
Then you get the first pick and that, so it's going to give you the first and the last, but that's fine. Now you're worried about it.
Oh man, this is a decision though. I wasn't ready for this decision. I thought I'd get both, and now I got to pick one. Oh man, I'm so down on Maryland. So down on them. I don't want them. But also, like, they're better on paper than anybody below that 6 spot. The only other team in consideration for me right now is Indiana, who has the best player between the 2. But, like, do I trust Mike Woodson? No. Do I trust anybody else on Indiana? No. Oh, I guess when I close my eyes and I have to envision one of these 2 teams having more success in Big Ten play this year, I see Maryland. So give me the Terrapins.
All right.
But God, I don't feel good about that at all.
This is the point in the draft where I think that you just stop feeling good generally about what teams you're picking, though. I think that goes to a certain degree to speaking to the maybe not the quality that we saw last season in it. I think that probably this year they get in 7 to 8. Does that seem kind of right into the tournament? I mean, it depends if there's a couple teams that rise up, but I think that we're kind of entering now into that territory where anything past 7 is probably a little bit of a question mark to me on teams that'll actually get into the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, there's a clear drop off after 7 to me. And could somebody surprise and sneak in? Probably. But to me, this feels like 7 teams that should make the tournament. 5 teams that will make the tournament, and then like Maryland and Indiana could both just choke. I don't trust either of those 2 teams at all. But I don't know. Fats Russell like could be good. Like Wahab is good. He's solid at center. I think they're going to really miss Ayala and Wiggins more than or Morcell and Wiggins more than they think they're gonna. Ayala's numbers are way better than I ever thought they were, though. So I don't know. Maryland, like I can squint and see them being a top 25 team, though.
I think that's fair. I'm not a Fats Russell guy. I like the center grab, the Wahab from Georgetown. I think that they needed to add it. If they would have had him on the roster last year to give them the ability to be like switchable and small, but then sometimes play big against some of the teams that they really struggled with, I think that that would have been a nice advantage to be able to play 2 different ways. I just, with the roster construction, having a smaller, inefficient point guard, I think that you pointed out he's never shot above 40% in his career. So it doesn't really bode exactly well that you got a shot chucker now at the point guard spot. Some of what made them kind of their special sauce or their secret sauce was the ability to be switchable and have a bunch of 6'5", like 200 to 220 pound guys that were kind of physical and were capable of defending multiple positions. Now you kind of go a different route on that. I guess if you get the best out of him some games, like to me, he's like a worse version of maybe Dwayne Washington, where he's a guy that can probably win a couple games for you this season that you maybe weren't expecting to do it. But he's also a guy that maybe is going to shoot you out of a couple and you're just going to be like, oh, that's no good. So I don't know. Turgeon gets a lot of hate, but he's consistently made the tournament and he's just quietly gone about his business. He's had a couple teams that I thought should have been better than they were, the Melo Trimble years particularly. But I think generally he's done a decent job of, I guess, keeping his job. So
yeah,
I'm going to Indiana. I think I would have chosen Indiana over Maryland had I had the pick. This is pick number 8, right? Is that where we're at?
This is pick number 7.
7, okay.
Yep.
So I'm taking Indiana. Like you said, Trace Jackson-Davis should be a first-team All-Big Ten guy. I think that they're going to get a little bit better guard play. Can it be any worse? They got Tamar Bates, who's a top 25 kid that they landed kind of late in the cycle with some of the recruiting momentum that they had. Who do I like outside of it? I guess that's part of it. I think Christian Lander is going to be better. I think it's really hard to reclassify and then play the point guard spot. I don't think it could have gone any worse for him than it did last season. So I think that he's going to have a decent shot. I like the combo guard that they grabbed from Pitt. What's his name again? You got to remind me off the top of my head. Xavier Johnson. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I was going to say Champagny, but it wasn't. It's Xavier Johnson.
Yeah. So he's kind of like a bigger, more physical downhill guy. I think that he's going to be capable of maybe giving them a little different look. They didn't have a guy that could just go get him a bucket. I think that's going to help from the perimeter. It just really is somebody going to be able to kind of set the table. They lost their 2 best shooters to transfer, Al Durham and who's the guy that went to Providence?
I get them all confused.
One went to Providence and one went to Virginia.
Is it Armand Franklin?
Yes. I think Armand Franklin went to Virginia and maybe Al Durham went to Providence.
But like these guys are so forgettable. No offense to any Indiana Hoosier fans who listen to the Spartan Hoops podcast. Like I just straight up confuse all of their mediocre guards that they've had for the last 7 seasons. They have like 3 every year.
His problem is he would land, at least one 5-star recruit every year, and then there was not that much to put around it. It was like he got one guy that was like a 5-star, and then the rest of the recruiting class was outside the top 100. Like it's pretty hard to eat when you're not building a base for him to be able to do it. They added Miller Kopp too, which I think is a great add for them. At least you're going to have a little shooting on the wing from there. He's got decent size from Northwestern. So I thought that the way that they hit the transfer portal was smart. I think that they rounded out some of the pieces that they needed. I think at the very least, the ability to bring back TJD and to create some momentum for a program that's kind of just been floating around for a while. I think it's bodes well. I mean, it remains to be seen what Mike Woodson does in terms of being able to actually coach in the college position. Obviously, he coached in the NBA level, so it's a little bit different. But I think that he's shown at least that he can recruit and that he can maintain some of the talent that he has. So we'll see what happens from there. So pick number 8 to you.
All right. So I have 2 teams I actually want with this spot. And the one that I would pick at 8 that I truly believe is potentially a top 7 team in this conference, I think is a very solo personal high opinion of that team. So I'm going to try and get strategic here and hope that they drop to me at 10 and pick a more traditional pick at 8, which is one of the only teams that remains on this board that made the NCAA tournament last season. It would be the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who got some really positive news in Ron Harper Jr. returning to school, in Geo Baker returning to school. I like the pieces that they have left in their front court, despite Miles Johnson leaving them for UCLA. I think that Amaruyi and Cliff Amaruyi, not the other Amaruyi who's now gone, is going to have a good year. He was a former top 50 recruit that was really buried behind Miles Johnson, can provide some rim protection, some physicality. Rutgers has dudes, and I think last year was not a fluke. I think it was a little bit of a turnaround for the program, and I would be surprised if a team that has Ron Harper Jr. falls much at all, even though they lose the erratic Jacob Young, who I think I was lower on than maybe anyone who watched Big Ten basketball. I couldn't stand that guy. I know he had some shake, but I don't think he did too many positive things for Rutgers. I think they'll be all right. Might sneak into the tournament, so I'll take Rutgers at 8.
I think that's a solid pick. I think that in terms of kind of that middle part of the conference, Steve Peichel to me is one of the more underrated coaches in the entire country. I think that at a certain point in time, if he wants to continue to build his own brand and his own legacy, that he's going to have to leave Rutgers, because you're just, unfortunately, he's kind of reached maybe what his ceiling can be at that program. He built it up from nothing, but if he wants to make Sweet 16s, if he wants to contend for conference championships, to me, he's probably going to have to move to another school. I like that the way that they play, their style. I think defensively he always gets his teams to buy in, so it's a pretty safe bet. I think that's a pretty solid one. I'm going to probably steal the team that you want.
Oh, no.
Because you were so high on Iowa last year. So that's where I'm going to go with. I'm going to snag Iowa. And the reason for that is we know they're going to be bad defensively. They're bad defensively every single year. But he's consistently turned out good offensive teams. And this conference is going to be one in which, yes, there's a lot of question marks and maybe the depth isn't as good. But I think it's a situation where a team that can put points on the board while other teams are in positions where maybe they don't have quite as much firepower is always interesting. I'm a huge Keegan Murray guy. I know you are. As you've talked on this podcast, he has a twin. So there's a possibility that we might see the Murray boys on the court at the same time together. I actually think that the McCaffrey guys are not bad. Patrick McCaffrey's kind of a hooper, the freshman last year. I like Aaron Ulis. I actually thought he's decent, and they have the ability to actually be a little bit more athletic. I know Bohannon's back, and that's kind of a mixed bag for me, whether that's good or bad. I mean, he's a high-volume three-point shooter, so you like to have it on the roster, but he's a guy that also has some athletic limitations for that, particularly defensively. But there's the ability with Toussaint and Ulis and some of these other guys where maybe you could actually have a reasonably decent defensive team and still have a little bit of the offensive firepower. It'll be interesting for me to see if Keegan Murray is capable of shouldering a primary scoring load. I'm a pretty big fan of just his fluidity, his ability to shoot and score, but asking to be a primary option versus option, number 4 on the team is a completely different story. So is he going to be able to take that step, I think, is the big question mark from them. But all around, for how much trash I talked about Iowa last year, that was because the expectations were too high. To me this year, they're probably right where they need to be. They're not going to be a team that's maybe viewed as a tournament team. But again, it's a tough place to play every year in the conference. Nobody wants to go play 9 o'clock on a Thursday at Iowa. And I just think the offense is going to be good enough to keep them in games in the conference that maybe isn't going to have just an absolute ton of firepower like we saw a little bit closer to last year. So that's my pick.
Good pick. Iowa was not the team that I had targeted. I spent as much emotion as I possibly could on a Fran McCaffrey-led team last year. For those listening to this that don't know, I was a straight-up Iowa stan last year.
I won a lot of money off Iowa because of you. I mean, you wrote them and you told me to ride them. So I won a lot of money because of Iowa. I didn't believe in them, not in the tournament or in, contending for a Big Ten title, but I bet them.
Yeah, I knew the spots to pick Iowa as a better, but I truly, like, just as a basketball watcher, became a fan of that team because it became a nobody believes in us thing, at least from a Big Ten fan's perspective. Like, everybody made fun of Iowa, and it turned out that everyone was right because Fran couldn't get them to the Sweet 16 against just an average Oregon squad. They're going to miss Luka Garza and everyone, CJ Frederick, Joe Wieskamp. Like, it's just going to be such a different team. I agree. Like, Keegan Murray should be a top 5 player in this conference immediately. Joe Toussaint is a guy that I believe has a lot in his bag that he's capable of. But it's going to be such a seismic shift that I'll be curious. I could see the wheels falling off. I could see them being okay. But to the team I actually was hoping would fall and did, I think this might surprise you. I'm going with Nebraska, the Cornhuskers. I really, really, really like Bryce McGowens. Really like him. And I also love the rest of their recruiting class. I mean, this Nebraska team has the 3rd best recruiting class in the Big Ten. And it's not because all of the other teams bring in bad classes. It's because they bring in a top 12 national class. Like, that's unheard of. Hoiberg's been around long enough now, through too many horrible seasons, that I just got to think with this type of talent, there's a jump in a positive direction. They've got the 2 McGowanses. They've got, what's his name? Kobe Webster still on the roster, I believe. And I trust that there's going to be more talent on the Nebraska sideline than about half of the teams in this conference most nights in Big Ten play. Will that turn into a tournament berth? Probably not. But I think, like, if they line up against the worst of the worst in this conference, as long as they don't shit the bed, excuse my French, like, they should get to 7-8 wins in conference play, which could be enough for me to win this very competition, DK.
That is fair. I do agree that talent-wise, at least in the upper echelon, with the addition of McGowens, that there's some nights where maybe he's just going to be able to overwhelm kind of that back half of this conference, particularly when we're kind of getting into this territory now where we're at. Delano Batten staying in the NBA draft, I think, was a decently big loss. Teddy Allen, to me, was kind of addition by subtraction. He lost the biggest shot chucker that you had on the team, and a guy that, you know, maybe how many stops has he made now? This is his 4th or 5th stop wherever he's headed to now. So I think that that's probably there. I agree with you to a certain degree for Hoiberg. Are we entering year 3 now, or is this 4?
I think this is actually, I don't know. I feel like it's 4. If it's only 3, it's been a long 2 years for Fred Hoiberg.
I'm just going to Google it real quick here, because it kind of feels like this is the year where he should take the step forward. All right, hold on. I'm pulling it up right now. So 2019. So this is only year 3. Yeah, but to me, this kind of feels like the year that he should take it. I don't love the rest of the pieces on the roster outside of the McGowens. You know, it's not great. Their front court was abysmal last year. That's part of the reason why they struggled. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out. What pick number are we on here? Is this 11? We're entering 11?
Entering 11 here. And so you get 11, I get 12, 13, and you wrap us up with Mr. Irrelevant.
Jesus. I mean, I hate to do it, but I guess I have to go Wisconsin here. It's probably the best bet. You talked about it in your article, but the fact that Greg Gard is having some of his players record him and then leak it out that they don't like him, it's probably not a good sign for just generally Wisconsin basketball. But to me, they kind of seem like a program that would continue to trudge forward with him. I mean, he got the torch passed, and, you know, from where he came from Bo Ryan, when they were consistently competitive in the top half of the conference, I would say, you know, towards the beginning or even the middle of Bo Ryan's tenure, Michigan State and Wisconsin were really the 2 main rivals in the conference. Then that kind of shifted when Beeline took over Michigan, and that rivalry kind of switched over there. But there was a lot of years where Bo Ryan was fighting hard for the top of the conference. I always have considered Wisconsin to be one of those programs where maybe I don't aesthetically enjoy it, but I like when they're good because I think it's good for the conference. It's sad to me to a certain degree that Greg Gard has kind of struggled with continuing to do it. I think part of the reason is just the recruiting has not been great. And as it apparently seems, he's not really, relating to some of the kids that he has. So that's probably a little bit of a concern. But at the same time, the style of basketball that Wisconsin plays, the grindy style on both sides of the ball, to me, that's just, it's so replicable that it doesn't really matter what the roster looks like to a certain degree. I think that their style is capable of keeping them in games just because it's so outside of what a lot of them play. I've heard good things about this point guard coming in, this Chucky Hepburn kid. He's 120th on 24/7's composite. They got a couple other guys that are kind of in that 150 range that they liked. They snagged a couple transfers from a couple schools. Most of them were 3-star kids, one from Wake Forest, one from UNLV, and one from Cincinnati. The remaining portion of the roster, Brad Davison's back. You obviously like what you have in Jonathan Davis. I think really he's kind of the star piece that you continue to build around. It remains to just kind of be seen what they have in Ben Carlson because he didn't get much run with Micah Potter and Nate Reavers in front of them. Now both of those guys are gone, so the PT comes up. You like Tyler Weil. Like they have a couple nice pieces. I'm just not sure if Jonathan Davis is enough to maybe drag them to the tournament. Their style of play would really have to get them there, I think. So I choose Wisconsin at 11.
I'm glad you took them because I would have had to taken them, and that just is sacrilegious to me as a human. So
come on, you did the interview with Brad Davison, and you said yourself he's a great guy.
Brad Davison is the nicest person I've come into contact to since starting to do any of this content basketball stuff. He legitimately is one of the most pure human beings on earth. I wish we would have interviewed him after the Greg Gard news broke.
Yeah, that would have been great.
We kind of hinted at it. We were like, what's it like playing for Greg Gard? And we noticed like he didn't really answer the question very pointedly, even though he was like the most genuinely nice person we talked to. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that's fair. I mean, let me ask you this. Do you think Wisconsin will actually finish 11th in the conference where you just got them, or do you think they'll finish higher than that?
I think that they'll finish higher. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish like 9th or 10th. Like if I could have switched my picks and chosen Wisconsin over Iowa, I thought just you wanted Iowa, so it was more of a strategic pick than not. But I think they'll be a fringe tournament team. And I know that sounds silly with the roster. Like I don't like anything about the roster outside of really Jonathan Davis. Tyler Wall to me is like a solid role player, but he's maybe like more of a bench piece on a decent team. I just think that the style of play that they have is just it's consistent, man. They've been consistently decent for a long, long stretch of time. And so even if there's some trouble in paradise with the coach, I just think that the program style is going to keep them on the railroad tracks. And I just have a hard time seeing it like really just go completely out into left field.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I am going to go the opposite route. I think this is train crashing into the station year for Wisconsin. I've been as skeptical as I could be for the past 3 years on the Greg Gard era. And I mean, God forbid, nothing this offseason has changed that. They're recruiting like they're the 12th best team in the Big Ten. Like they just are. They have been for years now. There's one top 100 guy on the roster. His name's Ben Carlson. Have you ever heard of Ben Carlson? Probably not.
I have actually, but that's because I'm a freak.
Right. So no, unless you're David Klein or his immediate relative, you haven't heard of Ben Carlson. I think
they did finish in the 21 class here that they brought in, and some of it's the volume. They signed 4 kids, but they finished 5th in the rankings for the Big Ten, top 32 class. And if you look back at Michigan State's classes over the last, I think, decade, they finished 28th overall in the nation. So this class ranking that they have is kind of similar to where Michigan State is hovered around if you take a longer average. They don't always finish here, but this particular class is actually a pretty Wisconsin-y class. A bunch of white dudes who are probably decently skilled, a couple of higher upside guys. That's just kind of what Wisconsin basketball, I guess, does to a certain degree. But I'm with you. I don't understand how they're not grabbing like a couple kids from Minnesota, like maybe 1 or 2 of the top kids from Wisconsin. Like, when's the last time they've grabbed like a top 100 kid from their own state? I think that's the problem right there.
Yeah, I mean the Tyler Heroes, the Jordan Pooles, just shot creators from Wisconsin are going elsewhere right now. So, all right, well that leaves me with the scraps, but not the bottom of the barrel. So I'll scoop up Penn State and Northwestern at 12 and 13. Neither of these teams have any notable pieces to mention. I guess Jalen Pickett is a guy I'm excited to watch, but Penn State's going to be more of the same. Northwestern should have brought their whole team back, but Miller Kopp chose to leave for Indiana. I actually would have liked Northwestern to make a little bit of a jump just off of continuity had he been back, but man, like there's just not a lot of talent on either of those teams. I don't trust Chris Collins at all. Penn State's got the new coaching staff. We'll see where that goes, but it's going to be a transition year. But either way, these two teams should get me like between 4 and 6 or 7 conference wins, which will be noticeably different than who I think you're going to be stuck with last.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have given you that swing back through, but I'm a nice guy. So if I lose because Minnesota is the bottom of the barrel, that's okay. I can take it. I think the Ben Johnson era will be interesting. You know, he's a Pitino assistant, so I don't know what that means from a terms of like, you saw what you got out of Pitino. You hope that maybe this guy is going to head in the right direction. At least he's got to start recruiting the state better. I think that's in a large part why Pitino didn't have success. Minnesota basketball is actually pretty strong. You know, you look at like a guy like Trey Holloman that Michigan State's in on. Those are the types of guys that Minnesota should be locking down every single year. You're not going to get a guy like Chet Holmgren. We get it. But like the guys that are in the top 75 to 125 from your state, you need to lock down your borders and get it. I haven't even looked at Minnesota's roster, to be honest with you. I know that they basically are hosting an entire team of mid-major guys. You got to maybe hope that 1 or 2 of them just pop, and you just get a team of guys that are pulling for the coach because they've given a better chance at it. And maybe you just hope that Northwestern and who did you take else? Northwestern, who's the other bottom team? Like
Penn State.
Yeah. Penn State will be interesting. At least they have Pickett, and maybe Pickett could have gone and played at a couple different spots. He's a guy that I know Michigan took a look at too, so maybe it's a potential spot where teams would have liked to swing and hit on him. So maybe he's just good enough to carry them a couple games, particularly against the bottom there on that. But yeah, I ended up with Minnesota. It is what it is. So now the real question is, what's the wager? Because we're running out of time here. You're getting close to the date. Yeah, I know you're the wager master. So
oh, man.
Where your mind is going for this.
I wish I had something off the top of my head for it. I was going to say I'll let you call it. It's your show. It's your podcast.
I did the flip for it, and I set the parameters that. I don't mind you choosing.
You're the man people come to see, DK. It's Spartan Hoops podcast. It's your parameters. But, no, I mean, you know I'm down for any sort of punishment-related bet.
Yeah.
So I'm down to get
running 90 minutes straight. That was brutal. And for those of you who don't know, Sleepers Media, they made a soccer bet, and Carter had to run for 90 minutes straight on the pitch. He filmed himself. That just looked absolutely miserable. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe we'll just give some thought on the terms. It's obviously in the, heart of the off season here, so we have a little time coming into it. I'll digest the picks, and maybe I'll give it some more thought whether I'm going to be in a position to win or lose. And if I lose, then we'll set like a nice, easy wager, maybe just food, beer, something like that.
Let's do this.
I feel it's close in a 50-50 shot, then maybe we do some form of punishment.
Let's do this. Let's crowdsource what the bet should be. And if you listen to this podcast and you give us a response that we like and we choose to be the best, we will send you some Spartan Hoops gear. How about that?
Yeah, we'll send out a T-shirt. I think that's a good idea. That's how we'll do it. So we will let the people decide what the bet should be. We'll take some of the best ideas, discuss it maybe on the next podcast, and then we'll let them choose. Did you write down all the picks? Because I was kind of going through it. We're going to have to listen back to the episode. I saw you writing something down.
Yeah, I've got notes. I've got I went Michigan 1. You went Purdue 2. I went Illinois 3. Michigan State 4 for you. Ohio State 5. Maryland 6. Indiana 7. Rutgers 8. Iowa 9. Nebraska 10. Wisconsin 11. Penn State 12. Northwestern 13. Minnesota 14.
Okay. I'll have to take a peek. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting, that middle bunch, right? I think that that's probably where it's going to be decided. It could be decided at the end, like you said. Like, I like my 9 and 11 picks. I think I did a decent job there. Obviously, Minnesota, whatever, that's, you get stuck with that. Maybe they're going to get 3 or 4 wins this year. That's going to be tough for them, you know. But that middle of the pack is going to be that 4, 5, 7, and then for you, the kind of that mix in there, that 3-6 combination. That's kind of maybe going to be where it decides one way or the other. I want to ask you this, and we'll get into maybe individual players in another podcast. We did it last season where we ended up doing just kind of like a breakdown of the top 10. I think we did guards, wings, and forwards, and then we did bigs. So I think we'll do that again this year, where we kind of rank them and try to put them in spots, and then maybe just kind of discuss them as a whole. But if you were looking at, you know, maybe one of those teams in the middle that could somehow push themselves into dark horse Big Ten contention, do you have a team that you like over any of the others?
I think there's only 5 teams that could realistically contend. If we're going to use the word contend, I think that means they're in the race with 2 weeks left in the season. That's an arbitrary definition I just came up with on the fly, but I think there's 5 teams that will be in that scenario. And I think Michigan State's one of them, and it's Ohio State, and it's Illinois, it's Purdue, and it's Michigan. I think Maryland and Indiana could both be good. I think Rutgers and Nebraska could both be sneaky, and those teams could find their way to the tournament. But no, I think this is really a true down year for the conference. And I think because of that, some teams near the top are going to look better than they really would. Like, I think just Ohio State's going to be a well-coached team, even if we don't trust Chris Holtmann in March. Like, trust that guy to win 12 games in the Big Ten minimum. I trust Tom Izzo to do the same with the talent he has. And I trust Curbelo and Kofi Coburn to pick and roll people to death. So those teams, to me, normally would be more middle of the pack that have a real shot to, like, sneak up on Michigan and Purdue and make things interesting. And I guess of any of the 5, this isn't a homer pick, I promise. I think Michigan State would be the sneakiest, because I don't think anyone truly believes they're going to be a factor down the stretch. And I think their ceiling is closer to top 3 in this conference than it is 5 or 6.
I think that's fair. And then the concern is just maybe that the floor is closer to 6, 7 than it is to that, right? I think, as we discussed and you discussed in your article, I think the variance of their floor to ceiling is maybe the greatest out of any of the teams in that top 7 of the conference. Like, they could go out and all the pieces could start clicking in February and March, and we could be like, okay, this is a second weekend team. This is a team that if they get the right matchups could maybe go on a little run. Or the pieces could not click. The point guard spot goes awry, and it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, like, buckle up for another season of, you know, basketball that's going to be up and down. We're going to be grinding it out. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that shakes out. I'll throw my hat into the ring on that question. I think Indiana is maybe the team that I think could be the sneakiest of possibly squeezing themselves into contention. I think that Assembly Hall is one of the tougher places to play, and that hasn't always been the case among Archie Miller years. But I think it's going to get rocking and rolling if fans are 100% loud. I know, you know, with the COVID surge here, it'll be interesting to see how they handle some of this stuff. But if we're at full capacity of that to me is a top 3 venue in the conference. You combine that with a, you know, first team all Big Ten, you know, preseason selection and Trace Jackson Davis. If you get enough momentum going and a couple of the guard pieces end up working out, to me, they're a team that at the very least should be competitive with all those teams that they're playing against in that top part. You steal a game or 2 there, and I haven't really looked deeply at their schedule, but you steal a couple games from there, and then maybe you put yourself in the last couple of weeks to be interesting. Again, you can't say perhaps you trust Mike Woodson as much as you would with some of the other guys on the top of it, but that would be kind of maybe my dark horse pick for a team that we have listed at 7, but maybe they would sneak into the top 3, top 4, and give themselves a decent shot at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I mean, my eyes will be on Indiana early in the season. But yeah, there's that group of Indiana, Maryland. Just I've seen this too many times. I've seen them be preseason top 25, and then they're okay. And, you know, I don't know what Mike Woodson's program is going to look like yet. I know they've got talent. he might be better than I think. I mean, shit, Juwan Howard surprised me in year one. Mike Howard could come in and do the same thing, being an NBA guy. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, we're almost done here. Greg's got a jet. But last question that I want to ask you, if you had to choose only two teams to be like national title contenders out of this group, are you sticking with Michigan and Purdue? Or do you think the upside of Illinois, if they put all the pieces together, is potentially higher? Would you say the ceiling is higher for those two teams than any other team really in the conference? Or do you think that Illinois deserves to be in that discussion?
I don't think they do. I think Illinois has a relatively high ceiling just because Coburn and Curbelo could be very deadly. But I think the other factors with Illinois' ceiling are Brad Underwood. Like, can Brad Underwood do anything in March? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I know they were a great team in the Big Ten last year, but quite frankly, I thought they should have won the Big Ten running away last season. I mean, I thought Illinois was by far the best team in the conference, and they struggled at times in conference play just to scrape to a second-place finish in the regular season. Now,
did they struggle at Chrysler Arena? I didn't catch that.
They did not struggle at Chrysler Arena, not at all. And trust me, I haven't forgotten that, and I hope Hunter Dickinson hasn't either.
Does Michigan and Illinois play twice this year? Do you know?
I don't remember. I feel like they do because Michigan had a pretty tough schedule.
I hope that they do because that'll be great theater. I'm like friends with some guys on Twitter for the Illinois fan base, and there's a decent, good population. But is there a fan base that talks more shit for having one good season than them? I mean,
right.
I like a lot of those guys, but some of them you're just like, you know, there's chatter about like Kofi Coburn needing to make free throws. I saw from some guy's account, and he's going to be a first rounder. This guy who was outside of the top 100, Brandon Pozinski, is going to be, you know, like a second round pick the next season. Like they love themselves some Illinois basketball, and I certainly appreciate that. But the realistic expectations are sometimes out the window for that fan base.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's make it or break it year. Like, you're blessed. You got blessed with 3 years of Io DeSumo. You did nothing with it other than one Big Ten tournament title. Congrats. Hang the banner and print it out and hang it 20 more times. I don't care. But you got blessed with 3 years of Kofi Coburn. That surprised me. Are you going to do anything with it? We'll see. But no, I mean, Purdue's ceiling is higher just because Jaden Ivey. And as much as I want to be the Jaden Ivey skeptic, if Jaden Ivey hits like people think he can, he could be an All-American. He's the best player in the conference. And on the Michigan side of things, obviously, it comes down to the freshmen. And, you know, I think Michigan's floor is higher than Illinois' too, just because you've got a guy who should be an All-American in Hunter Dickinson regardless. So, yeah, Illinois, step below. Do I think Illinois, like, even in their best-case scenario, could make a Final Four? Honestly, no, I don't. Yeah. I don't know if you would disagree with that, but I think it's really too serious.
He's won a total of 3 tournament games. I think it's much too early in his career to be able to say they're going to make a Final Four this year. I think that's asinine. Make the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2005, and then let's talk about it then. Yeah. So, NBA draft tomorrow. Pretty exciting stuff. Hopefully Aaron Henry gets drafted. You know, I've kind of seen him in that chatter like mid to late second round. I hope that he lands someplace. I personally think that teams are overthinking him to a certain degree. I think he has potential like Xavier Tillman to just come in and immediately be an impact guy. I think that he'd be a great guy to come off the bench, play defense, does a little bit of everything. You worry maybe about just the one single offensive skill set that's escaping him, particularly the ability to just consistently knock down a three. If he had that in the bag, I think he'd be a pretty safe, like borderline first-round pick. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets drafted and where he goes. So obviously all the best to him, rooting for him to land somewhere on his feet. So, but that'll wrap it up. I appreciate your time, Greg. I hope you have a good time with your NBA draft. And for those of you, you know, that don't know Greg, check out him at GWizzy12 and Sleepers Media. Definitely check out SpartanHoops.com, the article, like we said, in the Big Ten up. And we'll continue to come out with more content as the recruiting ramps up, and hopefully Michigan State lands a couple guys here because we've been waiting on bated breath for that for the class of 22. So take care, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, DK. Always fun, man. Appreciate everybody listening.
Take care.
See ya.